the hand hard just for a moment. At 10:03, I heard they asked if they wanted to have a fan. They said no, they didn't want to have a fan in there. At 10:03, the TV monitor came on, and you could see Roderick Davie laying down in his, on the bed in his cell. He was wearing a white shirt, blue pants, and bright orange shoes with white socks. They began to prep him as the families looked on. 10:06, they swabbed his arm. They got the heparin locks in place. 10:07, he looked at his right arm, looked back up, and looked at his left arm. Miriam Fife was holding Sandra's hand the whole time. About 10:10, they wrapped up the locks in place with tape. While this was going on, Randy was holding on to a picture that was in his right hand. He had a light grip on the picture, what appeared to be all three of the Coleman brothers together. At 10:12, Roderick Davie got up and walked the 17 steps to the death chamber. The door opened. When he walked in, he looked up and shot a quick glance at the victims and then laid on the gurney. The staff tied him up to the gurney. He kind of licked his lips. Then at 10:13, he looked directly at the victims for about, seemed maybe 10 seconds and looked into their eyes. Then he looked back up at the ceiling as if he were thinking. As far as the way he looked, he had a shaved head, a goatee that was grown out about 2 inches, and a mustache. About 10:15, victim's family just continued to look on. They were not making a sound. They were not saying anything. They weren't, no emotions coming out. And about 10:16, he continued looking up at the ceiling, just blinking. Looked like he was thinking. And then he decided that he was going to make a final statement. At 10:16, they asked him if he wanted to make a final statement. He said he did. Do you want me to read what I have?
You can.
Or are you going to just pass it out?
I will distribute it. They're typing it now. So
Okay.
I'll distribute it to the best of our recollection.
Yeah, from what I got, because it was a long statement, but he first said something about, I'd like to thank my parents for giving me unending love and support through this. My daughter Paris for helping me become a man and changing. My niece Brittany, I'm not sure what he said about her. Then he looked over at Miss Jeffries and said, I'm sorry. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's from the bottom of my heart. And he said something further. He also addressed the Colemans, but I was busy trying to catch up on that statement. And he said, then he looked at John Everett and said, John, I hope you can let it go, man. Forgive me. And he paused for a long time and said, you hear me, John? And then he said, I am, and it was something inaudible. And then he said, that's it. And then it looked like he kept repeating some kind of prayer, possibly. He was saying it to himself over and over again, and that was 11:18. Or 10:18, I'm sorry. 10:19, this whole time he was looking straight up. At 10:19, he rolled his head back over to look at the family. And said some words and finally closed his eyes. The family just continued to look on, not saying anything. 10:20, it looked like he was still breathing, and he had a burst of air that came out of his mouth. Family continued to show a little emotion during this time. But then the mother, you could see she was crying ever so softly and slightly rocking in the chair. I saw her wipe a tear away, and then there was silence. No one said anything. And then at 10:28, so just medical personnel walked in and checked his heart and vitals. 10:29, they closed the curtain. And then At that point, Kenny grabbed his wife Sandra's hand pretty hard and held on to it. And that was the point that Randy looked at that picture with him and his two brothers in it. Just kind of looked down at it. And at 10:31 a.m., he was pronounced dead.
I'm Joe Guillen with the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I'm the Olka pool reporter. I'll pick up where the seating is what I got, the arrangement she gave. So at 10:03, the victim was shown in the hospital bed in the monitor, visible in the upper right-hand corner and left-hand corner of the room you're in. Medical technicians were working on his while they were working on his needles, he was mouthing words. I took similar notes on his appearance. He had a shaved head. I saw more of a full beard compared to a goatee with a mustache. He had facial hair along his whole face. He generally was motionless while they inserted the ports into his arm. Again, we began seeing at 10:03. The victims were silent throughout the process, generally silent throughout the process. I also noticed Randy Coleman's picture. They were, the men, I'm assuming they're brothers too, they were outdoors. It was a dated picture. They were kind of in front of a street, and two of the guys were standing. They each kind of had a fist raised, and the third was kind of crouched in between them. The medical staff's work appeared to be done at about 10:12, and that's when Roderick Davie sat up and began walking toward the gurney. I took the same notes on his clothes. As they strapped him in, he looked over at the victims. The medical technicians were inserting tubes into his arms at about 10:14. Well, at 10:14, that's what the clock said in the room. At 10:16, the warden reached for the microphone in the room and asked me if he wanted to make a final statement. We have pretty good, I think, consensus on what it was. I don't have anything very much different from what she gave. Once the microphone was removed, he looked toward the ceiling and he was mouthing words as the warden and another staff worker stood over him. I don't know if it was a prayer. We couldn't hear. It was completely inaudible, the glass. We couldn't hear what he was saying at all. Saw him make any sudden movements or react physically in any way to the drugs. He was fairly motionless the entire time. I didn't really hear the victim say much of anything throughout the process. I noticed the hand holding of the two women in the front row. At 10:28, medical staff put on a stethoscope with his back to the audience, to the witnesses, and checked for vital signs. 10:29, the curtain closed. The entire front row of family members held hands. Everett, who was seated in the back left, kind of reached his hand out to the brother with the picture in the middle. I believe that was Randy Coleman. And he actually had a mint in his hand. But Randy grabbed his hand and embraced it as, to kind of shake his hand. And then at 10:31, time of death was